Welcome back to Broker Talk, your weekly insight into the residential real estate industry. I'm Larry Lawfer, your host each week. Each week, we bring you a hot topic and a special subject matter expert who knows the issue deeply. Our subjects today are affordable rentals, the Small Property Owners Association, who represent 60% of all the rentals that are out there, the rent stabilization initiative being discussed by the new mayor of Boston, and other issues pertinent to the development of safe growth, smart growth. My guest today is Steve Bremis of the Steve Bremis team. The Bremis family has been actively involved in real estate in Somerville since 1955. They are fierce supporters of this community. Through this legacy and active involvement in the community, Steve speaks a truth about Somerville and its homes from a deeper perspective. Welcome back to the show, Steve. Thanks for sharing your thoughts and information.
Thanks, Larry.
Let's It's a pleasure to have you back, Steve. Let's start off with a third rail issue of rent control. When you look at this issue on its surface, it can be simplistically thought to be a good solution for the need of more affordable rentals. What do you think of this logic, Steve?
I think that when it was in place before, it never accomplished what it was supposed to, and in fact was an area of abuse, if I can say it that way, uh, even amongst tenants. And it caused properties to deteriorate because landlords wouldn't put the work into their properties. Properties were being left vacant rather than actually rent them. It just did not accomplish, and it still won't accomplish what they're trying to do. And the problem is they're going after the small property owner to resolve their issues, and it does nothing but hurt people that, like we talked about briefly before, mom and pops who have had some of these properties for years. They've put their sweat equity into it. For some, it's their only, um, it's their only wealth that they possess. Um, my problem is with a lot of the things that we do is I don't think there should be any involvement to attack that wealth, and it's certainly not going to resolve the problem. And I think small property owners' rights need to be protected.
Let me
I mean, we have to look at the bigger problem with this stuff
Yeah,
too.
yeah, exactly. Rent control is not new. It started in the '60s and with co-ops in New York. It was here in Cambridge in the '70s. You think it's great because the rent can't go up, so it helps affordable the affordability of the property. But here's the issue, and you defined it in some respect. But what happens is if 60% of the rental market is controlled by these mom and pop people, these small property owners, then you are cutting their ability to make a living or make passive income from this. And the people who are living in affordable rent controlled properties, they're never going to leave. They're going to stay generation after generation. And that's why property owners can't afford to fix the property because they're not making anything to do it. Do I have that right?
You do, but this is the other thing too. I mean, they're going after the small property owners. And I'm going to tell you something. These people, these owners, these small property owners that have owned their property 20, 30, 40 or more years, guess what? They're not the ones charging the top rents.
Right.
I, and I don't know, I'm sure you've heard it repeatedly. If they live in the property, they're looking for someone who, they're comfortable with, that and they're looking for the best people. They're not looking for the best dollar. So more often than not, those small property owners are under market. They're not the top rents that this is supposed to be attacking. And that's what's so ironic to me. They're the ones that are actually giving the best rents out there for value wise. It's the newer developers that come in that are spending all this money, making these things luxurious, and charging accordingly to turn a profit. So
Hmm.
um, again, they're attacking the wrong person. It So back when there was rent control, if I was going to put on a roof and it cost, I don't know, let's say that roof cost $20,000, they would apportion it over the life of the roof, and that would be my increase. So I could spend $100,000 and maybe get what, 75 or $100 rental increase. The bottom line was no one was going to spend the money, and they didn't.
Exactly, exactly, and that's why it didn't work then, or it will not work in the future.
Absolutely.
Um,
Correct.
uh, the mayor in Boston. There's a new mayor in Boston, and she has a thing called rent stabilization. Is that your email?
It is. I'm trying. I
Could you
can't turn.
turn that off? That's
I'll try. Let me see if I can. Uh,
just close your email out. We'll
okay. Yeah.
get
Yeah.
back to that.
Okay.
Um, By the way, real estate agents get 600 emails a day because we have to have our email out there. And there are so many bots and people that want to tell you like really horrible things. Or, by the way, I want to send you $1 million. Just give me your social security number. Uh,
Right.
anyway, Mayor Wu,
Yeah.
brand new mayor, politically active. Of course, she's the mayor. She has a program called Rent Stabilization Program, and she has some listening sessions that she started. And unfortunately, people of the Small Property Owners Association weren't allowed into those meetings because they were going to ask pertinent, very specific questions. Um,
Yeah.
do you want to talk about that for just a little bit? I know it's a political issue, but uh, from my understanding, real estate is the backbone of our economy.
Right.
People live in homes, they buy their homes. People who pay taxes have homes. You know, we know where you live. The IRS says, and
Right.
we're gonna get you to pay. And
Right.
and all of these issues are governments trying to solve their economic issues by hitting on people who own property and people who are investors in property. Seems
Right.
crazy to me.
It is. It is. No, listen, we need a seat at the table. And part of, you know, we filed it. We filed an 85 page lawsuit against the city of Somerville. And that was against the condo conversion ordinance, which was specifically targeted at small property owners. Um, part of the part of that.
Define that a little bit better because we're
Sure.
jumping subjects from
So
here.
specifically, and just to touch on it quickly, the city of Somerville wanted to make a seller wait 1 year if apartments were vacant before they converted, 2 years if they were occupied, set specific amounts to give to the tenants if they had to relocate, which nobody I don't think has a problem with. But it was the time period involved that was holding them up. Now, the conversion could take upwards of 5 to 7 years. And during that time, there was a rent control stabilization language, if you will, that basically said that during that time period, you could not adjust the rent.
Right.
So that's where the rent control element came in.
Right.
So it took what was the strictest condo policy in the state and made it 3 times more difficult. And that's what we're fighting. So we presented that to the court about 3 weeks ago for a directed verdict. And it's kind of like what you're alluding to here. The judge was asking questions of the city. Well, and then the other elements were it had to be offered to the tenant for purchase and the city of Somerville for purchase before it could actually go to market. So the judge's question was, well, who's setting the price? And he clearly, I felt there was a degree of uncomfortability, if you will, with the fact that the city could be a purchaser and who was setting the price and who was sitting on the city's council, so to speak, that was making uh, these decisions. So it's like what you alluded to. We need a seat at the table. If you're going to impose all these restrictions on us, we just need a conversation. And we're not looking to eliminate anything. We're just looking to make it more palatable. We're not arguing that there's not a need for more housing, but involve us in the process. don't hurt us in the process and don't take away what we worked so hard to earn and build.
So let's get to that in just a moment. Let me circle back and help the audience understand who's buying, what are they buying, and why are they buying it. So an investor, say mom and pop, some people have some money. They want to put their money into residential real estate for a period. They want to rent, have someone pay a portion of their mortgage, some of the money. And they want to get an affordable rent, whatever the rent is at that particular time. When the government steps in and decides that they are going to curtail what you can get from rent or extend the amount of time it takes from going from a rental property to being able to sell it as a condominium and what that means to affordable rentals, that becomes a convoluted process, and no investor is going to go into a thing saying in 7 years it might work. They
Right.
just won't. All that money will disappear, and then what's going to happen to these properties? We don't have an understanding of that yet.
Listen, it's a situation too where what everybody loves about Somerville right now, guess what, was developed and created.
Right.
Right? So they took these dilapidated properties that no one wanted,
Right.
them up. Now all of a sudden you love what's been created and you're trying to tear it down. That's
Right.
it's really unbelievable. And I'll
Right.
give you an example. We had a multifamily up for sale, oh, I don't know, about a year and a half ago. So everybody's complaining that there's no housing, all the developers snap up the properties. Well, we had it on the market for 45 days. It was below the typical sales price of a multifamily. And there wasn't one homeowner that came forward that wanted to purchase that piece of property. But and eventually, after the 45 days, it was picked up by a developer and developed by a developer. But it was an eyesore in the neighborhood. It was such a big project that no one wanted to take it on. And these are the people that you know you're attacking that created something that you are so near and dear to, and that are trying to protect. It's just there's ironies everywhere.
So let's get to the more positive aspects. Let's instead of defining all the problems now, let's talk about how what some of the solutions are because they're not being discussed in the right manner. Zoning is one of those issues. Um,
Absolutely.
and zoning is a huge issue. How many people can live in a home? How many, where you can build, what you can build on where, how many floors you can have, how many rooms you can have. All of these things are controlled by the towns, not just Somerville, but it happens in every town across this country. The zoning boards are determining that, and there is no regularity to any of that because it's determined locally within the community.
Mhm.
Um, and how is the zoning process in Somerville right now?
They changed a lot of the zoning. So in some areas it was loosened up, and in some areas it was made more strict. And it was a plan that took years to put together that finally is together, and they definitely targeted certain areas for development. Um, so in some cases it was better, and in some cases it was worse. But I think that you know locally and uh, if you want to look at the government, there's listen, there's affordable housing, but why isn't the city increasing the amount of affordable housing? Why isn't Boston building more housing? Why is it on the small property owner to take on that burden? So I don't know why. And if you want to create a fund, that's fine. We talk about luxury taxes, and we talk about transfer taxes and things like that. If it goes towards affordable housing, it should be going towards something that's built towards putting it to people that need it, right? But I have yet to hear anything on the state level or the local level about housing that's going to be built for these people.
Right,
It's
right.
only
Or
restrictions,
what's going to happen?
right? It's
You
only restrictions placed on the people that are building stuff already. But why
right.
aren't they taking properties, some of which are abandoned? Listen, I've seen abandoned properties here. I've seen them in Dorchester. I've seen them throughout
Yeah, they're
Boston that,
everywhere.
that
Yeah.
could be developed into brand new affordable housing. Why isn't the city doing that?
Well, you brought up a couple of issues.
Because it loses money. I don't know. If they charge affordable rents, does that mean the city takes on a burden?
Yeah,
But no matter.
I don't think governmental housing has ever been a win-win across the board. It hasn't been in years and years. But
Yeah.
I want to get back to, because you brought up the concept of transfer tax, and so let's define that. A
Sure.
transfer tax is a new tax that's going to be in the greater Boston area, and I think starting in Boston itself. If you sell a property over, I believe it's $2 million, that there is going to be an extra 1% that the seller, which includes the seller and the buyer, because the buyer buys it and they both include in that price, but that it has to be paid, an extra 1% has to be paid to the local government, and that 1% of the funds of that multi-million dollar property is allegedly going to go into a fund that's going to help affordable housing. They haven't defined any of that. All they've defined is we want the money. And that is another taxation without representation.
Right.
It's specifically targeted to people who own multi-million dollar properties, and that's single family or multifamily. And that extra 1% is a considerable amount of money.
Sure.
Um, we do need to balance our budgets, but couldn't we do it with a better fiscal governments doing better fiscally? Um,
Right.
I'm speaking from the outside and saying, hey, stick to your budget, but it's difficult to run towns, and people look for the simplest solution, and the simplest solution is often the homeowner.
Right.
And that's because home ownership is a dream and a nightmare. Because you own your home, you're going to have maintenance, you're going to build equity, and that's why people buy properties. But you have all of these new issues that are coming up, like your zoning issues. So you can't do this with your home. The transfer tax. So you have to pay another 1%. That's less. That's 1% less in your own pocket. These are huge issues.
Right. No, no, they're definitely huge issues, and there's no question. I mean, part of this Biden thing that got introduced today about
That's
housing.
that's Mart. That's May 26th, 2022. Today.
But one of the bigger things in there is zoning, and I think as just looking at it briefly and just our conversation now, that's definitely something that I think will help. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's a very positive part of what they're talking about.
Yeah.
If you can increase the zoning to allow more affordable units, but this is the problem when a lot of these. Uh, uh, so in Somerville, when you want to do a certain number of units, you also have to offer affordable units as part of that, right? Which is fine. However, many times that affordable unit is costing the developer hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I'll give you an example. We did a 29 unit building. They had a number of affordables that the city wanted done. The value of those affordable units was 800,000 to $1 million, let's say. The price that the city wanted for that affordable unit was under $200,000. So they're taking an $800,000 loss on the market value, but there's no way the developer is building even that unit at a cost for what they're selling it for. So if you're going to encourage affordable housing, you can't be taking out of the pockets like that either. You have to either help the developer or do something that doesn't hurt as much. I mean, we're supposed to be trying to create it, not find ways to avoid it. The only reason the developers are even including it is because they have to, but the project is profitable enough for them to do so. But take the scale and lower it. So now, if you have 2 units and you want to add a third unit, it's only a 3-unit project. They want the third unit to be affordable. How's that even possible?
Well,
It's not, and so therefore, all those units are not being built.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And let's define affordability. Affordability is defined by 80% of prevailing wages. So if you are looking for affordable housing and you make, say, the average salary is $1,000 in the community. I don't know what it is in Melton, but because it's easier math, and
Yeah,
my
yeah,
math is not good. So
sure.
if you are making, if it's 100,000 and you're making 79,000, then you qualify. You qualify and you can get into an affordable housing. But what you just pointed out, Steve, is a different thing. If its value is 800 and they're looking for it to be sold at 150, that's like less than 20%
Yeah.
of the value.
Right.
That's just of course it's not going to work from a
If you
financial
if you
point of
want to
view.
get units built and those are your provisions, they're not being built. So how does that
Will
how is
not
that
be built.
helping solve the problem?
Right. Let me bring up another one, which is really common and people don't think about. So I'm going to talk about the town of Milton, which is another town in the greater Boston area, right a little bit south of Boston. And in this town, they have a rule that say, for instance, you have multifamilies. I'm choosing this town because there's a bunch of multifamilies. So you have multifamilies and they're rentals right now. But somebody makes a purchase of that with the idea that they're going to take it from a single family or a multifamily and they're going to make it condominiums. There are restrictions in there. If that hasn't been done on that block, then you can't do it. But if there's one already that has had whatever that conversion is, whether you're going from a multifamily to a condo or a single family to a multifamily, because many big houses can be split up and be multifamilies, you can't do either of those things unless it already exists on the block. And then you can go to the zoning board and you can ask the zoning board, would you do it? The zoning boards right now are saying, no, we don't want to do that. So if you're going to rent those properties, then you have some more rental property. It's not it might not be affordable rental property, but it's more rental property. We need both
Correct.
because the other shoe hasn't dropped on this pandemic stuff. There are going to be REOs, real estate owned. There are going to be foreclosures that are coming onto the market for people who couldn't afford their mortgages during the time when so many people couldn't work. And what's going to happen with all of that property? And can we convert that quickly or easily to affordable properties to purchase or affordable rentals? We're not looking at those issues in
Right.
that way.
Correct. No, you're right. We're not, and we need to. The point is with the pricing as well. If there's very little supply and demand is high, prices are going to be high. So obviously, if you're going to add more rentals and you're going to loosen up zoning and allow more units to come to market for sale or for rental, that's going to bring down the prices.
Yeah.
I mean, however, all the restrictions are also restricting the addition of units. So you should be able to realize, they should be able to realize that if units aren't being built because the restrictions they put in are too severe, that it contributes to the problem.
It
They're not.
does. It doesn't solve anything.
It doesn't, and in fact makes it worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the thing is to obviously to loosen things up a little bit and actually increase the supply.
And so because this show really looks to solve problems and help, what do you think the solutions are? Let's talk about them again. Zoning is one.
Zoning's definitely one. I have heard from a number of developers that I work with that they don't mind paying some type of a fee. It's the restrictions of waiting years and carrying costs and things like that. So, bottom line is, if there were even a flat fee per unit, it's something that they could deal with.
Right.
There is money that can be contributed towards affordable housing
Right.
that is not in place now that would aid both sides.
Right.
So,
Right.
there, if if there was a fee, it could be anywhere from 10, 20, up to 50 grand a unit. It could be based on square footage,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But if something contributes towards affordable housing, the city actually builds affordable housing with that money. I think it would service both sides. The developers could actually build; they know the cost of doing business, um, and it would allow them to at least proceed and operate their business. Right
Right.
now, it's you have to sell us the property, you have to wait years, you have to pay the tenants, we might be able to purchase the property. It's just far too overreaching.
Yeah. Might be able to, also might not be able to. And by the way, just wait for us. We'll get back to you. That's no way to do business.
Well, just the fact that I have to offer it to my tenant and offer it to the city before I can go to the open market, that alone is just seems unconstitutional to me. So you
Yeah.
can't go to open market until you pass through A and B. That's really horrendous. Think of all the multiple bids and all the money that you lose, and the market basically sets the value. You're not allowing the market to do anything because you're trying to pull it off before it even hits the market.
We are not lawyers and we can't speak about the law, but that sure sounds like a restraint of trade. If you can't sell your
Oh, it is.
property, you know, sometimes I dress like one. Hey, do I look like a lawyer right now? Uh, Please don't call me. I have no knowledge whatsoever. Uh, I often say a day without a lawyer is a good day, but
We're gonna start with the lawyer jokes.
yeah, there's such an easy target. Uh, we could get to bank jokes too, but we'll do that on our own time.
Right.
What do you think some of the other solutions are? Not just Somerville, but in this whole greater Boston area, that we as community involved people we can be talking to our politicians about.
Well, 40B was all, and sure you're familiar with that. Was not necessarily such a bad thing, um, and maybe trying to work with that type of a program. So 40B specifically said that if there wasn't a certain percentage of affordable housing, that it would allow a developer to circumvent the local codes, so to speak, and put in affordable housing units. What happened was it became a weapon for the developers who weren't getting what they wanted and communities who did not want to allow them to put in these affordable housing projects. So if I were going to put 10 residential singles in Reading, and the city says, nope, I'm not giving you 10 residential units, then the developer could say, okay, I'm going to do a 40B and I'm going to put in 40 affordable apartments. And now all of a sudden the city's willing to sit down and talk with them. But maybe we make something a little more palatable. Maybe we make affordable housing districts too. And that's where kind of zoning comes in combination with maybe
Yeah,
like a 40B. Maybe we offer money through
right.
these fees that we're collecting to help developers build these affordable housing units because they don't seem to want to do it themselves, for sure.
Well, because it's not economically feasible for them to bear all of that burden. That if you're being forced to put in something that's making you less money, then you have to cut somewhere somehow.
Work with
And
the private sector, maybe offer them lower rates for doing so. Maybe offer them
yeah,
tax incentives to do that
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
I think a lot of creative ways that uh, can be can be done and accomplished to create what we want.
It's so hard to go through these all of these complex issues in a short 30 minutes. Steve, I really appreciate you spending the time here with me again. I'm glad to hear your father's doing better. We
Yes,
look forward to his complete and speedy recovery and get out there and telling you what to do because God knows you need that, right?
absolutely, Larry. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having
It's great and great having you here as well. I want to thank Steve Bremis of the Steve Bremis team for being our guest today. Thanks so much, Steve. Tune in next week for another great show.
Recording stopped.